Hey everybody, it's Carl, and today I want to talk a little bit about taking and stealing from Savage Worlds Pathfinder for other settings. I was in the Kickstarter for Pathfinder for Savage Worlds, and there's just a ton of great information, and it's probably going to be available for sale, all of it, I'm sure. And I wanted to talk about things that I stole, or I'm going to steal, and use in other settings that I'm doing.
It's a savage world, strangers a weird war. It's a savage world, classics to explore.
Hey everybody, this is Carl again with Tabletop Tango, and we'll hope that you like what you see and you subscribe. We're pushing to try to get to a point where we can use some of the community tools, which would be pretty awesome, but obviously not looking to be famous. So let's talk about Savage Worlds, Pathfinder for Savage Worlds, and all the really cool stuff that comes with it, and what I'm stealing for my other campaigns. So, keep in mind the core book for Pathfinder is all of Suede with some changes. Some are minor, some are a little more major. And so it's a standalone book that you can use for fantasy. It really redefines fantasy for Savage Worlds. Goes, a step beyond the old fantasy companion. And I looked at that and I said, there's some really good stuff that I can use for my other settings, whether it's modern, whether it's fantasy, or not fantasy, but cyberpunk, that sort of stuff. And the first one is class edges. So the new concept, and there's new mechanics behind this idea of iconic edges or class features that really define kind of what a class is in the sense that D&D would think of them. And they have the things in Pathfinder like barbarian, wizards, rogues, that kind of stuff that you'd expect to see in a fantasy setting. Now, maybe that's not exactly appropriate for other settings, but the concept and the idea behind these class edges and the prestige classes that are prestige edges that kind of link to those is a really good idea. And the mechanics behind it, I think, are well thought out and really interesting. So I could see, doing, if you want to do that cowboy in space, creating class edges that kind of define the archetype of this of the player character beyond just which normal edges they would pick. That maybe defines kind of iconically what they are. Just like you think of a wizard, it's got certain things that define it. Maybe you've got, pirates got certain things defining it. Mechanics has certain things defining it. Gunslinger has certain things defining it. All really interesting that I'd like to explore and use in, as I'm doing new settings. Right now, I've already got a campaign where we're doing kind of godlike beings using superhero companions. So can't do it yet, but I think it's something that I'll use for another campaign. Second thing that's really nice in this new book, and there's been lots of discussion and debate and talk about magic items and Savage Worlds, permanent magic items, and the Pathfinder book brings kind of their take on crafting and building permanent magic items. Obviously, in Savage Worlds, there's the concept of arcane devices that you can give to somebody. They eat your power points. You're kind of held in a device, and people can use those with the proper roll. In Pathfinder, they added crafting permanent items. Given enough time and successes, you can do something like that. That makes a lot of sense for many settings, because many settings have arcane backgrounds, and those arcane backgrounds may want to take and put that power into something. Think of a horror genre where power and mystical power is in books, as spell scrolls that you have to use. Even in kind of a cyberpunk, maybe there's a thing where psionic power can be infused into a device, and then that's applicable or useful. Maybe it's just a MacGuffin. Maybe it's, something very important that's in a government lab that's difficult to get to and is an amazing treasure that the characters would find. But crafting is one of those other things that I think the core book brings to play that's really interesting. Now, getting outside of the core book and talking about things that come with the Pathfinder Kickstarter or are new to the Pathfinder for Savage Worlds, one of them is the new chase deck. I like the chase system as it's defined in Suede right now. Use it. It's adds excitement. The idea of moving between the cards and having those different things you can do as far as bumping somebody or trying to close the distance or increase the distance. All very nice. But the new chase deck that comes with Pathfinder has a different approach to it. I'm not going to explain all of it, but there's dealing of the cards. You're playing cards, and those cards have bonuses on them or specific effects on them, as well as defining the order. There's an idea of chase tokens, which define kind of the distance as opposed to laying out cards and moving across the cards. Haven't used it yet. I've read it. It'd be something I'd like to do, but I use a virtual tabletop, and the copy I have yet is not VTT assets. It's the PDF book. And I don't plan on, printing it out and try to do it on my desk while the players are virtual. I have to decide whether I want to cut those little pieces out and then put them into the VTT or wait until those VTT assets become available. But that's another one that I think will be an interesting addition to my toolbox for chases. Something that's always difficult for me or spending time is I like to do the quick game master. I like to be really fast in my prep, and so I usually do things like somebody you're going against. They got D6s across the board. Something they're good at, they got D8s. Stuff they're not good at, they got D4s. And I'm ready to go, and I'm ready to rock. What's difficult sometimes is then you got to think about, well, does this person have edges, or there's something unique that I have to take into account? So for wild cards, that doesn't work as well. What's kind of neat in what's released as part of Pathfinder, and it's been done with other settings, but they've added the archetype cards, they've added adversary cards, and those are, basically a fully fleshed out kind of wild card that you could use. Obviously, it's geared towards fantasy, Pathfinder. But it gives I looked at them and I said, well, that gives me a really good starting point. Maybe in my setting where I have a different edge, I could pop an edge out, pop an edge in, or I could use them because, again, the Savage Worlds edges, except for maybe arcane backgrounds, are all really accessible in any setting. That's part of what makes Savage Worlds cool. So I looked at them and I went, wow, that makes my life for, if I need to just pull out a quick wild card, I have something at my fingertips I can just use, and it came with the Pathfinder for Savage Worlds. Now, the last thing is, again, with my low prep way of doing things, I usually go and I find a monster or a creature in kind of the Suede book, which is, a short bestiary, and say, okay, it's kind of like this one, but it's got some tweaks. Right now in my, God's Awakening, I have Medusas and things like that, and I took the Medusa, tweaked it, and I was done. And that's maybe a bad example because they actually had a Medusa. But for other things, evil jellies and stuff like that, or gelatinous cube, I pulled something that I thought and I changed it. Well, now with the bestiary for Savage Worlds Pathfinder, there is a wealth of creatures, and obviously they're fantasy related. Some of them are very tropey, things that you would have seen in D&D a million times. But now you've got a whole new, smorgasbord of creatures to start with. So if I want to create some kind of, gelatinous cube, but it's different, but I have the gelatinous cube, or I have an ochre jelly, or whatever it is, I can start with and go from there. And that's true of a bunch of creatures. That's nice for me to, build out my own creatures. It's always nice to start with something that's close, pull out monstrous capabilities, pop in new ones, or even just say, well, this creature should be invulnerable to this. Let's just make them invulnerable to that and go from there. So very cool. So class edges, a great addition mechanically. Crafting and enchanting magic items and that sort of thing, or arcane devices, great stuff, very useful. The chase deck, new way of handling it. Maybe it works better than the one in Suede. Adversary cards, somebody you can pull out. Archetype cards, again, something you can just pull out and use. And then the bestiary, just adds a lot of, cool creatures that you can use to define or use as your baseline. Really cool stuff. I love Pathfinder for Savage Worlds. Haven't been able to play a game of it as Pathfinder, but I'm looking at, boy, I can pull stuff out and start looking at how I might use that in my own games. And I already have, at least from the creature and the prep standpoint. So very cool. Again, I'm Carl, and if you like what you saw, please subscribe and like it, because I'm really hoping to get to a point where we can use some of the community tools, and that would be just fantastic. Once again, thanks. Talk to you later. Bye.
It's a savage world, strange as a wind war. It's a savage world, classics to explore. It's a savage world, in the land of the dead. It's a savage